Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started with our webinar today. The topic, What's the Fuss? Low-fat diets, is one I'm very excited about. Forget low fat. And the What's the Fuss series that we do here at Oriant is where we take a popular trend in health and kind of debunk it, decide if it's true, is it not true? It's kind of like the Snoops for health. So we are excited to talk about low-fat diets and whether they're healthy or not. Our presenter today is Emily Fenwick. She is a coach here at Oriant and has been here for many, many years. I consider Emily a good friend of mine, and I am very happy to have her with us. Are you there, Emily? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I'm here.
Perfect. Well, before we turn it over to Emily, I just want to do a quick bit of housekeeping. First off, your 5 points that you'll get for participating in today's webinar will be available to you on your account at myoriant.com just following the presentation later this afternoon. I think everything will be up and applied to your account, so you can check that out. And then also, we really love it when you interact with us. So on the panel in front of you, there is a chat feature or a questions panel. Go ahead and interact with us all that you want. I know we say that every time and we mean it. We'd love to hear your comments and questions, particularly with this comment or this topic. I think there's plenty of confusion and questions. So feel free to ask them there and we will do our best to answer them either as part of the webinar or we can send you some follow-up information afterward. I want to make sure we give you all some good information. So with all of that said, Emily, I'm just going to turn it over to you. As you get started, tell us a little bit why you like this topic, why it's a fun one for you to teach about as well.
All right. Well, thank you for having me today. This has been one that's been fun to prepare on, and it's a common question that we get from many participants that we visit with and clients that I have as well. It's confusing. What really is healthier? So hopefully we can answer those questions and kind of lead you down a healthier path today to get you closer to your health and wellness goals. So really, what is the fuss? Let's start with basic nutrition. This might be very familiar to many of you, but we want to start out with this information to help guide you into maybe understanding how to build a healthier diet. So we have three basic macronutrients. We have carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And each of them have their place and purpose in helping our bodies to be the best and healthiest that they can. Carbohydrates are the first go-to source of energy for our body. And our bodies can convert them to a sugar very quickly, which in turn becomes the energy. Proteins would be the next source. And you can see on this chart some more specific purposes of each of these macronutrients. Proteins are great for muscle building. They are for help with satiety. They can also help with helping you to feel fuller longer and maintained energy. So that's kind of your second go-to for an energy source. And then we have fats, and we need those for cells and nerves and tissues and hormones. Lots of benefits for fats. We have to have some fat for our body to function properly. So we can see with carbohydrates, we can get them from grains, fruits, milk, and yogurt. Proteins, milk, meat, poultry, fish, and legumes and nuts. In the fats, we can get them from unsaturated fats, from healthy oils, and avocados, nuts, and fishes. The thing to think about too is in each of these areas, there's many sources for these macronutrients. There's also varying degrees of quality. As far as carbohydrates, we often hear complex carbohydrates versus simple carbohydrates, and some are better than others. And that's what we'll find as we explore a little bit more about fats. You can see this chart here with the percentages. So a balanced diet, the recommendation is to have about 10 to 25% come from protein, 45 to 65% of your total intake come from carbohydrates, and 20 to 35% come from fats. Now again, we want to remember the quality of those macronutrients and where they're coming from. not just carbohydrates. Okay, that means I can have 65% of white bread every day. That's not quite what it's going for. It's looking for those quality carbohydrates to fill up those percentages. Okay, so now that we have a little understanding about those macronutrients and how they're important, let's delve into facts about our fats in the diet. So there are nutritious, there are some that are unhealthy, and there's some that kind of have a middle ground in there. You can first see the Lovett. These are what we call unsaturated, poly or mono. We won't go into those specifically today, but you can see the picture there. Some examples: avocado, fish, nuts, healthy oils. Our body needs these, but they can't be produced by our body on its own, so we have to get it from our diet. They can help with lowering our cholesterol, helping balance our triglycerides, and raise our good cholesterol, which is HDL. The ones to limit, we talk about saturated. Those are found mostly in animal products. They are solid at room temperature, and they've seen as those increase in a diet that often the cardiovascular disease and that risk also raises. So those are ones we want to moderate. The ones to lose definitely are the artificial trans fats and hydrogenated oils. Those also are solid at room temperature, but they are man-made. They've been created through processing and through just as we become more products that need to have a longer shelf life, they're finding those man-made fats helped to do that. All right, let's talk a little bit about how body fat functions and how it helps in the body. So we talked about it being an energy source. It's very concentrated. There's a lot that you can get from fat, although it is the very last energy source that your body will utilize. It helps our body to transport different vitamins. It protects, it insulates, right? Want to keep those inner organs safe. The kidney, liver, they need something to be protected with. We look at nerve and brain function. Fat actually wraps around those nerve cells so that the electrical messages don't have interruptions and they can go directly where they need to go. Helps with skin and tissue, and then finally with hormones.
Thanks, Emily. I want to jump in here really quick and just ask you a quick question. So basically what you're telling us so far, you're kind of giving us a basic rundown of good nutrition, right? Like where we should get our calories from, what kind of fats there are, and why we need fat in our body. And I think all of this is very beneficial because one of the comments I saw online prior to this webinar was, is fat a friend or foe? So overall, what are you telling us here as far as that, friend or foe so far?
Okay. I'm saying it's a friend in moderation. Our bodies need fat. We want to make sure that we're choosing healthy sources of fat to properly help our bodies.
Perfect. I agree as well.
Okay, so here's the one group of omegas that we talked about that is important. Our bodies cannot make these, so we need to get them from our diet and from our nutrition. Again, these are some benefits and helps of those omega-3s. One is decreased inflammation. We're seeing an increase in arthritis and joint pain. And so this really is great to include these in your diet to help moderate those pains that you may have. Also heart health and the brain function. We see also an increase in Alzheimer's and dementia. So this is a great thing to include on a daily basis.
Thanks, Emily. I have a couple questions here coming up really quick. So before you move into the next phase, I wanted to throw a few of those at you, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
First off, when you're talking about the balance as far as the percentages of macronutrients in your diet, what's your take on low carb? The question is, what happens if you eat very little carbs, and is that bad?
Okay, so as I mentioned, carbohydrates are the immediate source of energy. And when we talk about low carb, most people I think about not having rice or pasta or bread. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We also need to remember that carbohydrates are also fruits and vegetables. And those are a good thing to include in that carbohydrate percentage. However, our bodies can benefit from whole grains and from those. If you're doing a lot of high intensity aerobic exercise, carbohydrates could be supportive for that so that you can maintain a good intense level and keep your exercise going. Again, you have to look at your personal goals, but I think cutting out carbohydrates as a whole for some people isn't as beneficial as might be for others.
Perfect. So basically it's pretty individual, but you also want to remember those fruits and vegetables for sure are healthy carbohydrates and not really ever to be eliminated for the most part.
Yes. Okay. Let's talk about the history of this. When did this idea of a low-fat diet come about? We have studies that started and date back to the 1940s. They showed a correlation between high-fat diets and high cholesterol levels. And so from this, they thought that, okay, if we implement a low-fat diet, then we might be able to prevent heart disease in some high-risk patients. Then by the 1960s, the low-fat diet began to catch hold for everyone, not just high-risk heart patients, but thinking the whole nation could really benefit this. We could decrease obesity, we could help everyone to be thin and well. And then in 1980, the low-fat approach became really the thought of everyone. They thought this is what we need to follow. It was promoted by physicians, the government, the food industry, and the food industry really took hold of this, especially as they could implement it in their marketing and advertising to really sell their products, and in the health media too. We saw it all over. However, if we look at those same years at the obesity epidemic, it actually increased. They weren't seeing a lot of decrease in that problem. Some of the heart conditions had gone down, but obesity was still becoming a problem. And we would see more processed foods that would be combined with low-fat additives, and the nutrition overall of the American public was going downhill. So there was kind of a conundrum here. They wondered what was happening. And so just recently, they're finding more evidence that showed that we have to have a little bit more moderate approach to fats, not necessarily cut them all out or say everything has to be fat-free, but there has to be a healthy balance in there. So another thing that was introduced then is to look at oils to help decrease the saturated fat, as they encouraged Americans to have less milk, not necessarily less milk, but low-fat milk versus the whole milk, and to use vegetable oils instead of maybe shortening lard, those high saturated fats. The trouble that comes there is in a lot of baking and cooking, they turn out a lot better when you have more of the solid fats than if you use an oil. So the food industry then created hydrogenated fats. And so they're a processed oil that becomes solid at room temperature. So if you think about shortening and margarine, those are some processed oils. And it's been known since the 1970s that they were dangerous and not really nutritious, but they were still being allowed in foods for quite some time. So as we talk about this new process and creating of foods that are low fat, the food makers had to adjust the recipes. They took out the animal fats, but they also take away the flavor. Just think about, the taste of bacon. You took away that grease, the flavor is just different, right? So as they took out the fat from these foods, the flavor, the aroma, even the texture was changing. And they do food tests and people just weren't satisfied. It just thought, this just isn't as good as the fatty kind. So what they came up with was then to add different vegetable oils. They had chemicals that they could create, add more sugar, add more salt. Let's process it more just to get that texture and flavor right. Well, they might have taken down the calories, but if we look on the other side, what did they have to add in order to make it palatable and enjoyable for people again? There are, one example I think of is they were going for low calorie, fat free. I think of 200 calorie packs. It's like, oh yeah, I can eat these cookies. they're healthy because they're low calorie, low fat, so I'm just eat them. Well, who's really satisfied after one package of those? You know, does it really calm your sweet tooth, or maybe you'd go back for more? So instead of the 200 calories, you maybe jump up to 600 pretty quickly. So here are some quotes from different nutritionists at Harvard, and also another one from different nutrition resources. And Gary Taubes said, "We started producing these low-fat products that in effect replace the fat in yogurt or cookies or whatever with carbohydrates. Conceivably, this belief that set in that carbohydrates should be eaten to excess and wouldn't cause any weight gain, and that they were both heart healthy and the ideal weight." So here again, it's shifting. So let's not eat fat, but we can eat as many carbohydrates as we want, and we won't get fat, or we won't gain the weight. And Walter Willett said, "One of the most unfortunate unintended consequences of the fat-free crusade was the idea that if it wasn't fat, it wouldn't make you fat. I even had colleagues who were telling the public that you can't get fat eating carbohydrates. We can very easily get fat from eating too many carbohydrates, and the public was really directed to only focus on fat calories, when we really have to keep an eye on calories, no matter where they're coming from." So I'm going to jump back. I didn't necessarily talk about on the first slide, but the macronutrients, carbohydrates and protein, provide 4 grams of calories per gram, whereas fat provides 9. So fat provides a higher energy source per gram than do protein and carbohydrates. So that's where he's saying you need to look at where the calories are coming from, not just, and also how many you're taking in.
Emily, can I jump in here really quick?
Yes.
I relate a lot to these quotes, particularly because, excuse me, because I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and it was in the 90s when I started reading labels and trying to pay attention to nutrition information and learning what's healthy, trying to not gain weight as a teenager and whatnot. Fell very far into this low-fat thing. I think I told you when we were preparing that in high school for lunch, I would choose a Sprite or maybe some Starburst and thought I was being healthy because they were both fat-free. How far off base was I as a teenager attempting to eat good, healthy things? Of course, neither of those are at all natural, so I was far off the mark. But I think many of us kind of did that. I recall going for pancakes and scooping the butter off my plate and then throwing on a whole bunch of syrup. So anyway, I think this is something many of us maybe have experienced personally.
Yes, it's a shift to maybe look at what is my body going to function best on and give it the best nutrition versus just the calories. For example, you look at licorice, it's fat-free food, but if you took 100 calories of licorice, is it going to function better on that or 100 calories from apple and maybe a tablespoon of natural nut butter? Exactly. Yes, you might get a few more calories with the apple, maybe. You get the fat, but which is going to support you better?
Yeah, and I think that was the missing piece, at least for me personally, and maybe for a lot of us as we stocked our pantries and fridges with low-fat foods, not really considering the nutritional quality of what we were choosing to eat instead. So
great. So here's a couple question and answers. So if you're an American and overweight, should you be on a low-fat diet? A great question. This is a response, that we pull from different scientists and those who've studied it, is that it's really the wrong diet for an overweight person because the person's overweight, in general, they're going to have quite a bit more insulin resistant and much less ability to tolerate low fat and a high carbohydrate diet. A larger person requires more calories to maintain homeostasis or keep their body going at rest, and also to perform movement. So they really need to look at the calories that they're taking in and have a good balance. Calorie restriction can help people to lose weight, but if you go too low, you also can just cause them to want to binge or overeat, which causes harm in the long term. And coming back to knowing the energy source or amount per macronutrient, if fats have twice the amount of calories per gram as carbohydrates, then doesn't it make sense to push a low-calorie diet and therefore a diet that equals then low fat? And again, I come back to looking at how satisfying the diet is. We have different mechanisms in our body that control our intake of calories and helping us to feel satisfied. If we have a high carbohydrate diet, especially if they're refined carbohydrates, it can be challenging to control those calories. Maybe we keep wanting more, or our body burns that energy quickly and we eat more often. So ideally, we want to focus on consuming energy-dense foods that help us to control those portions and get the most nutrition back. I like this quote from Jeannie Goldberg of Tufts University. She said, "So the goal is not to say fat is good, carbs are bad, but to say there are good fats and bad fats, there are good carbs and bad carbs. There's good protein, there's bad protein. So an optimal diet would be low in bad carbs, but high in good carbs." So again, coming back to looking for quality nutrition, choosing the foods that are most nutritious in each of these food categories that help your body function its best. So again, the best dietary advice that we've had for over 70 years, we keep coming back to, is eat more fruits and vegetables, keep your calories in balance. You don't want to be taking in more than you expend through exercise and through your daily activities. Keep that checkbook balance, per se. Have the same in as you're going out. Or have a deficit, right, if you're trying to lose that weight. Pay attention to your labels, and we recommend keeping food in their natural state. The more processing they get, typically the more chemicals they're added, and the less healthy they become. So we're gonna maybe play a little game, right, Anne?
Yes, exactly. So we're going to play this game in the following slides called Would You Rather? And I put these slides together, these next few. I came up with the food choices for Emily. She's the guru. And so we are going to ask her which she should choose, because I feel like often we are in these conundrums when we're trying to make healthy food choices all day long, and we're not exactly sure which is best. And sometimes we're choosing between good and bad, sometimes between healthy and healthy, or sometimes we're just not exactly sure how to make the healthiest choice for ourselves. So yes, so this, I think first you can explain to us how we read these labels and how we'd compare, and then we'll go into some different foods to choose.
Okay, and even if you want to play along in the chat section before I maybe pick one or the other, type in your guess of which one you think would be a healthier option, so you feel like you can all participate. So if we look at the nutrition facts, you can see this on the side panel on the label of foods. This gives you an idea. You can see a serving size for an average 2,000 calorie diet. That's what they base this on. And you can see that down. It says percentage values are based on 2,000 calorie diet. Now it also tells you how many calories are per serving, how many calories come from fat. You also see the total fat, saturated fat, and so forth, even the vitamins, sugars, carbohydrates, and so forth. The percentage is what would help you if you're using that pie chart that we showed at the very beginning to get your 10, to 25% of fat and so forth. These numbers would help you when you're figuring that. Okay, so here we have regular cottage cheese versus fat-free cottage cheese. Cottage cheese is a great source of protein, gives you some calcium as well. I want you to each look at the ingredient list. Let's look at the length of that one. Let's look at the calories. The regular has 110 per serving. Calories of the fat-free is 80, so different of 30 calories, which, I don't know, it's not a large deficit. Look at the sodium on the fat-free is 410 versus the sodium on the fat, which is 390. That's considerable on there, especially if you're trying to have a low sodium diet. Sugars are about the same, protein stays about the same. So from this one, I would point you towards having a small amount of fat and look at the basic ingredients you get versus, I don't know, can anyone want to pronounce some of those names? Do you know what those are, or do you have them in your kitchen? You could mix them up right now. So on this one, I say the regular wins. All right. This is the tried and true battle for many people. Would you rather butter or margarine? So again, look at the ingredient list. Of course, we can, if we don't have the label to show necessarily the percentage of fat or the calories, but just based on that ingredient list, which one would you rather put in your body?
Emily, I think this is sometimes when you're standing at the grocery store and you see butter at almost $5 a pound sometimes, and the margarine at substantially less, sometimes we're tempted to throw the margarine in the cart. But that ingredient list should hopefully steer us to the more natural food.
Right. Cost can make a difference. As I went through nutrition classes, we'd always joke that margarine was just one hydrogen away from plastic, which truly it is. If you look at the chemical writing of margarine, it's one hydrogen off of having the same equation as plastic.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Okay, let's try the next one here.
All right, so here we have butter, which we just talked about, and olive oil. This one's tricky because we know that olive oil is good for your heart and there's benefits for it. So again, looking at balance, it's an individual basis. What are your calories that you're going for? What are your needs? Maybe if you decide to have butter at breakfast, you don't have it at dinner. You use some olive oil for your baking. So balance it out. You can get nutritional benefits from the butter. There's also qualities that olive oil has that butter doesn't. So that's a challenging one, but one that you have to gauge on your personal goals with calorie intake.
I ran into this one last night. I was sauteing some sweet potatoes and I used olive oil, but we kind of like the taste of the butter better. So at the very end, I added a little butter. So maybe it's both. But overall, I was trying to limit, of course, because you don't want it to be this super high calorie potato that we're having for dinner after all is said and done. Okay, next.
And you actually bring up just one thing you bring up a good point, Anne, is actually in how you prepare. So different oils and fats can sustain heat differently. So butter can stand a higher temperature when cooking than olive oil. So actually, if you heat olive oil too high, like in frying, it denatures the oil and actually makes it rancid and can cause problems in your body. So that's another, a whole nother topic, but there's also its place.
Perfect. Yes, good info.
Okay, so here we have a Greek omelet and yogurt and berries. Yogurt's good, right? It has some protein in there. So with the Greek omelet, again, let's look at what we're going for. We've got the protein from the eggs. We've got fruits and vegetables, which essentially are kind of free carbohydrates, right? They're not going to spike your sugars quite like a refined grain would. In the yogurt, many of the yogurts add a lot of extras, kind of like that we saw in the cottage cheese, added sugars. So that would, again, look at the label, look for the quality of ingredients, and if it's a good balance of lower sugar, maybe higher protein, but not a lot of processing.
Okay, I agree. I'm a Greek omelet girl. That's what I would choose because I like them also. Okay, next.
All right, here we've got a good balanced sandwich. Looks like we've got some vegetables, we've got whole grain bread. Here we've got the salad with lots of vegetables, some chicken for our protein. Again, here we have to look at our individual goals. Did I already have too much bread today for breakfast? Maybe I'm gonna go for the salad with no carbohydrates at lunch, just to balance it out. maybe I haven't had any grains today and I could use some. Then maybe I'd go for the sandwich. Again, controlling the portions as well. You have to be careful. I know from one restaurant, they have kind of a harvest sandwich that looks like this, and it has more calories than just a smaller roast beef sandwich. So you can't be fooled. Again, look at the labels and the nutrition facts.
Emily, on this one, I thought this one would be probably one of the trickier ones because they both seem to have some good ingredients. So that's why I included it, because sometimes you are stumped, like, is this healthy or is that healthy? And I didn't include nutrition facts on this because sometimes they're not available. So I like how you described it. Like, do I need bread? Could I use those grain carbohydrates? Should I stick to something a little lower in those carbohydrates, yet the avocado salad's a little higher fat content, which will of course increase the calories. So again, making the point, it's all about balance and your individual needs and where you are at in that day. Does that make sense? Okay,
Yeah.
almost done. A couple more here.
Okay, so here's a snack option. We've got apples and some almond butter, so that gives us a fiber and a protein, which really, if we can have a protein, a fiber, and a fat at every meal or snack, we can know that we're eating balanced. And typically when you choose that protein, it will have some natural fat in it, like the nuts do, and cheese will have some. So there again, this is a hard one. Let's look at what you need for the day. When you eat an apple and the nut butter, do you feel satisfied enough? When you eat crackers, do you feel like they go through you quickly? Maybe your body really processes them faster and you end up consuming too many to feel like you're getting full. So maybe the apple and nut butter is a better option for you. But both provide those three things that we're looking for: protein, fiber, and a fat.
Perfect. This one I put in there to stump you, Emily. You probably don't eat either of these for dinner almost ever.
Oh, I think Mexican's my favorite. Who doesn't love Taco Tuesday, right?
Exactly.
So, again, it's looking at where you are and what your personal goals are. And maybe we could make this a little, if we're making these foods, maybe we could make them healthier. Maybe with the ground beef, we could do lean ground turkey. That could be an option. Or try doing fish tacos. That's one of our favorites. And then if you're doing the spaghetti, again, you could use ground turkey for the meatballs, or you could use whole grain noodles. Or who doesn't love the zucchini noodles, or using squash? That's a great way, and you put the sauce on it. So that's a way to cut out carbohydrates if you already spent those for your day and you didn't want to have that many. But again, you have a little bit of fat in there from the meat, and there's some cheese on the spaghetti and the tacos. So keeping it balanced is really what we're looking for.
Great. And this is our last would you rather dessert.
Okay. Ooh, whole cream. I remember my mom talking about milking a cow and just having that right out of the cow. Anyway, think about this. Which one is more natural? Which has been highly processed? Which is going to give your body the best nutrients? So yes, you get quite a lot of fat, maybe from that cream, but how much do you really need to be satisfying? You don't need that much. This is a pretty big cup of yogurt. We've got sweetener in there, corn syrup, solids, gelatin, food coloring. So again, which is going to be best overall to help your body function?
Back in the 90s, Emily, I would have picked the frozen yogurt because it would be fat-free, where the berries and cream would have a higher fat content. But now I know a little better, and definitely berries and cream would be a delicious dessert at the end of the day.
Just looking at the picture, which one makes your mouth water?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you. I'll continue on to our last slide and you can wrap it up for us. I love all of your answers on those slides, so thanks for playing with me.
Okay, so really we want to focus on not necessarily saying good or bad, right? Let's look for the most nutritious. Some are more nutritious than others. If we can keep that negative thought out of our mind and create a positive relationship with the food of just more nutritious, more natural, and moderation, that can bring us good health. Keep the balance, choose quality, unprocessed foods where you can, And remember that calories count. No matter where they come from, calories count, but some foods will provide calories and nutrients that are more benefit to your body. And we do need some fat for, as we talked about, for the different functions of the body.
All right. Thank you, Emily, for this very informative webinar. I hope everybody enjoyed it and has something that they can use now as they head off for lunch to make a healthy choice when deciding how much fat they're going to be consuming, how much carbohydrates, protein, and the sources that those come from. So I think it's been time well spent. So thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, a copy of the PDF of this presentation will also be available on the website. I know some people have been asking for that over the chat feature, so watch for that on there, and also a recording of this presentation today will be available as well. So, and your 5 points, of course, will always be on there. So make sure you join us next month for our December Wellness Wednesday, where we will be talking about to-do lists. But in the meantime, thanks again for joining us today, and we'll see you guys next month.